Calling Bensenville District School Board District 2 and call to order on Wednesday, November 15th, 2023 at 6:30 PM. Do I get a roll call?
Mrs. Dye?
Here.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
Here.
Mr. Laudadio?
Here.
Mrs. Leyva?
Here.
Mrs. Miller? Ms. Parthamos?
Here.
Mr. Stolten?
Here.
Okay, we established a quorum. Let's do the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have a public comment? Or they don't want it? Okay, we don't hear no public comment. We're moving on. Public hearing to receive comments of the proposal to sell bonds of the district in the amount of $5 million for the purpose of increasing the working cash fund of the district. We're going to open the public hearing. And then, I don't see we got any, receiving any comments. Nobody's here. Okay, Paul? What is it?
If there's nobody here from the public to ask, then,
We'll just go on. We're gonna,
this is the bond issue we've been talking
Yeah.
about for several months related to the
just in case
renovation.
anybody wants to know. Okay, hearing no comments, we're gonna close the hearing, go back to the board meeting. We're gonna do it again, the public hearing to receive comments on the payment, the permanent transfer of funds from education fund to the transportation fund. I'm opening the public hearing. I don't think Ann wants to say anything. Do you want to say what we're doing there, or it's self-explanatory?
Yeah, so we have a proposal to make a transfer to the education fund, and the reason we're doing it is this year we bought a particularly large number of buses, so that what we spent is beyond what we usually spend in the fund.
Okay, any questions or anything on these guys?
Have we gotten the buses yet? I know there was a hold on them.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Anything else? Okay, hearing none, let's close the hearing and we'll return to the regular board meeting. Celebrations.
Sure, so we have one big celebration tonight, and that is that tonight is Board Member Appreciation Day. So we really just wanted to thank each of you for your service, your dedication to our students. There's a small token of appreciation in the bag for each of you. So I just wanted to say thank you.
BSD2 picture.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
The one we want, right?
It would be nice.
Okay, we'll tell them.
Okay, moving on, presentations, teaching and learning update.
Sure, so tonight we have Dr. Ann Panessa here with us to share the update on our academics. This is something that we do yearly in regards to our summative designations from the state.
So this evening, we'll be looking at the ESSA accountability school designations, a review of our Illinois annual assessments, chronic absenteeism, and then the next steps that we'll be taking as a district to continue to make growth and improvement. So the Illinois report card for 2023, this, oh, you have the wrong presentation, Tim. Let me share this with you. All right, we're going to do a quick update here. Will you pull up, it was just shared with you.
Sorry. My email or?
Yes, I just shared it.
Did I attach the wrong one?
No, it's the old one.
All right, so it'll come back up. Same agenda. All right, if you could go to slide 4, please. There we go. So the summative school designation is a multiple measure that goes into the rating for each school. As you can see from the pie chart, two of the biggest factors are our growth as measured on the IAR for math and ELA. The next largest is our chronic absenteeism rate at 20%. And then the next two largest are our proficiency on IAR in both math and ELA. And then equally weighted at 5% is the climate survey, the ELP to P, which is our English learner proficiency, progress to proficiency, and then 5% on our science assessment. In the past, that was only on participation, and now back to this rating, it is on proficiency. And you can see on the right, while we do measure all students, that's what the overall rating is on, it also is a factor as far as how each of the 7 subgroups do, which you can see there. So just a reminder that Illinois Assessment of Readiness data is an annual assessment in ELA and math, grades 3 through 8. The dynamic learning maps is the assessment measure given to our special education students. That access score for our ELs, for any of our students who receive English language learner services. They have the annual assessment where we could see their progress in their language growth in all 4 domains and help us to monitor their success as they meet that 4.8 exit criteria. That's the composite score needed to no longer qualify for those services. And then the Illinois Science Assessment is given to our 5th and 8th graders each year. So we'll start out by taking a look at Tioga. As you can see, the growth on the IAR, the green line is the state, the yellow is the school and how the school's performing. So based on this, it gives you that overall snapshot of how Tioga is performing. Again, if you look at that growth on the IAR, surpassing the state in math and very close right there in ELA.
And 50 is the target for growth, so they like to see you at least at 50.
Okay. So on this, you can see where Tioga falls in comparison to the performance of all of the schools in the state of Illinois. To the right is that 81.45 and above out of a metric of 100. That represents the top 10% of schools who receive an exemplary rating. And then anyone at 35.39 or below to the left side of that curve receive comprehensive or other targeted support. So as you can see, Tioga at 67.54 is solid in the commendable and actually moving more towards that exemplary range. So this is a new histogram that the state provided this year, just to give you that overall view of how that school performed. All of these metrics are out of 100, as you can see there. So Tioga is commendable. And you can see each of the points they earned in the categories. One area that we're looking at across all of our buildings is that chronic absenteeism measure. You can see here at Tioga, we're at 45.59 out of 100. And you'll hear in a little bit the different measures we're taking to help make improvements in that area, as well as our strategic plan to continue our academic growth. Okay, moving on to Johnson. Again, like Dr. McCluskey pointed out, for that growth on IAR, that goal is 50, and they are very close to right there with each of those. So for ELA, the growth of 48, as well as in math. So very close to achieving that 50. This shows us where W.A. Johnson is performing in comparison to the other schools across the state of Illinois. So right within that commendable status. And then that's that overall view again of where Johnson is at. So the overall of 56.31, which is that commendable status. But again, as you look at this, each of those metrics is out of the 100 points, and really looking to make movement, again, on that chronic absenteeism at the 44.18, as well as continuing our obviously our focus in our academic areas. Next, moving on to our middle school, you can see, again, that target growth of 50, very close in ELA, right there at 47, and surpassing that in math at 52. So if we look at how Blackhawk is doing overall, if we look at all students at 60.68 overall, they're right in the middle of that commendable status compared to other schools within the state of Illinois. But as we look at their histogram, you'll see that Blackhawk is currently in targeted status. And that is because if any of those groups that we showed earlier, any of those subgroups do not perform, if they're anywhere below that rate where a school goes into below comprehensive, which is 35.39, if you have one of your subgroups that are performing at the same level or lower than that bottom 5% within the state, then that puts your entire school into that targeted status, where we'll be working closely with the state on an improvement plan. And this is very similar. Blackhawk was targeted in the same area in 2018-19 prior to COVID, again, for the achievement of the EL student population. This is a group in an area that was already on our radar prior to any of the ratings coming out. And you'll see what work we've already begun this year to make a difference in the outcome for these students. So look, and then if you could go back, Tim, too, I want to point out our chronic absenteeism rate, which is definitely an area we're focusing on across all buildings. But as you can see at Blackhawk, 38.51 out of 100. So that is something we're definitely addressing, and you'll hear more about that. So now let's look at the next steps. So specific to improving the outcomes for our English learner population, we've made a shift in how content is delivered at Blackhawk. So all of our level 1 and level 2 EL students that are more at the beginning phases of their English language development, they are now in specific EL content classes. So their ELA, their math, their science, their social science are with an EL endorsed teacher and a content teacher to make sure that they're having access to grade level content in a way that's comprehensible for their current English language level, while having that same rigor and helping them move forward in both their content and their language development, which was not in place before. That is in place this year. We're also providing training in sheltered instruction observation protocol, also known as SIOP, for our staff. These are specific strategies to help make content accessible to our English learners, including building background knowledge, a focus on vocabulary, to help ensure that the content they're receiving is meaningful, and again, that they can grow both academically with rigor, as well as continue to grow in their English language development across all domains. We've also formed a dual bilingual committee to collectively review our data and determine the vision and next steps for our programming K-8. So this is really taking a close look at both our access and our academic performance data historically, looking at how we are delivering services and what adjustments we want to make to ensure that our students from any language are being successful here in our district, and are set up to be successful as they move on to Fenton, as well as helping to make sure they're ready to earn the seal of biliteracy, which is a tremendous opportunity at the high school level. We want to make sure while they're with us, they're on track to attain that goal. Also, we've made adjustments at the start of this year to our EL service delivery at the elementary school. We've been very strategic this year in the way we're scheduling our EL specialists so that they're pushing into classes during their literacy block, during those language-rich times within their core content instruction, where they can deliver those state-mandated services. And then we've also made adjustments to the language allocations, making sure all 4th and 5th graders are really having the majority of their day in English, so they're prepared to move on to Black Hawk to be successful there. Of course, all of the work we're doing academically is aligned to our strategic plan and those curriculum priorities we've identified. We're continuing to increase student engagement through our authentic communication work. We're in year 2 of our partnership with UIC, where we're focused on our district math leadership team with an emphasis on high-quality math tasks, providing rigor across the district in K-8 around high-quality tasks. Our ACE and STEAM programs are continuing to reach more students with extension opportunities. And now we're really building our capacity now that we're in year 2 of utilizing our NWEA MAP growth to help progress monitor our students and place them into meaningful tier 2 interventions, which include providing extra support as well as extensions for those students that need more of a challenge. So where do we go from here? We're continuing our work with our professional learning communities. So our teachers are teaming together, they're coming together around that data and analyzing and determining what needs to be done differently for different student groups to help make sure everyone is provided the responsive instruction they need to meet them where they're at and move them forward, and really furthering the capacity of our teams to do that work together. Another key change this year in the area of science, Black Hawk for the first time has moved to an integrated approach to science, which is how the NGSS science standards were meant to be taught. So we have an integrative approach, which is providing our students with more hands-on science experiences. And this has been done in partnership with Dr. Carol Baker, who was one of the authors of the NGSS standards. Next, we have our work in the Bentonville 2 Literacy Committee, or the B2LC. We're working together to identify a vertically aligned, rigorous curriculum for K-8 literacy instruction. And then our elementary math pilot work is continuing as well, with elementary teachers, as well as some of our middle school teachers, administrators, interventionist specialists, coming together along with our UIC partners to land on an elementary math curriculum that will support the rigor and supports we want for all of our students and engagement. For our dynamic learning maps, next steps, that team will continue to review the data available and help them to make sure their curriculum is aligned to meet the essential element standards and the diverse needs of that student population. And as you saw throughout those overall school images for each school, that chronic absenteeism is a definite concern for us in the district. We're collaborating together with district and school-based teams to review data, implement supportive processes and procedures to work with our families to mitigate absenteeism, to provide support, to keep that communication going, to make sure everyone understands how important it is to be here at school, as well as collaboration with the DuPage ROE on truancy, working with other districts who are facing some of these same issues around attendance and bringing back ideas, sharing our ideas so that together we can help students across DuPage be in school and continue to have the opportunities to grow. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
I do have a question.
Sure.
One of the items in the strategic plan was to make sure that the curriculum and everything was consistent,
Correct.
throughout the schools.
Yes.
And I'm noticing that Tioga's numbers are drastically higher than Johnson's. So is there a way we can find out what Tioga is doing and copy that at Johnson, or what are we doing to rectify that gap?
Sure. So some of that, Mrs. Dye, is the work around those professional learning communities and how teacher teams come together to use data. And one of the things that we're doing is having incubator PLC teams. So these are high-functioning teams that are working with the district-provided forms that help drive that responsive instruction. We're working to capture that and share it across all buildings so that all teachers can see what those high-functioning teams look like, sound like, what those conversations are, so that we can see that increase. The curricular materials themselves are the same, but it really is a lot of the work of those professional learning communities where teachers are at a regular basis diving into their data, having those powerful conversations together. It's that shared collective ownership of students and working together. And we are at different levels across the district with how those teams function. And so that's how we're working to address that.
I would say the other work that we're doing is really building the capacity as an administrative team. So once a week, we meet with the administrators and we have conversations around data. We're digging into the data as an entire team. We have another big data day on the next Tuesday with all of the administrators, looking at the data in each of the schools and starting those conversations about, you know, what looks different about this data, why, and really getting down to some of those root causes. And also has instructional administrative huddles, because we want to build that capacity in our administrators in all of the curricular areas. So each of our administrators are assigned to a grade level group cluster. So they might be K2 or 3-5, so they can really hone in on those instructional practices at those grade levels and really become instructional leaders at those grade levels. And then when they feel confident in that, we're going to switch them to the other grade levels in future years. So for example, right now, Carlos is K2, Saul is 3-5. And so they're working with those PLCs on a daily basis. Those are the teachers that they're evaluating. They're really kind of honing in on that data so we can see that consistency district-wide.
And another element, just to build on that, our work with our PLC coaches in each building, like Dr. McCluskey said, within those meetings that happen weekly, the building administrators are also digging into the data with them to help build the leadership capacity of teachers to then help lead that out within their teams.
Question. Oh, go ahead. You already go first. Okay. So I picked up on the same thing, and my question kind of off of that, do the professional learning communities work across different schools, or is it individual to the building?
We are doing some across schools, and in
Okay.
fact, we've intentionally structured our Teacher Institute days that way this year. So again, coming up this Monday, all of K2 will be together, all of 3-5 will be together, and that's been very intentional to help build that collaboration across the buildings.
And that's new this year.
Did we just start
Yes,
that?
exactly.
We just started that this
Start
year.
Because I know
we
that
wouldn't have saw a
that's,
difference.
right.
Correct.
And to Jackie's point, I think the concern too is that we're not siloed in the schools, because that's always a concern
Right.
in the community as
Correct.
well, because our kids eventually all go to Black Hawk and then Fenton, and we want to make sure that they all have those opportunities and that it's
Correct.
equitable.
Absolutely, and then
That's really
even,
where that common curriculum is coming in
Right.
and ensuring that we have the staff at all of the grade levels representing for both schools, so that when we're making those selections, they're the just right selections district-wide, and, teachers are held accountable to using those resources.
Yeah.
So that we do have that common opportunity for all kids across the district, regardless of which school they go to.
Yeah. And then I just have a few more points, but this is not necessarily a question, but more of a comment. I know that we want to be data-driven and informed by data, but at the end of the day, these are little humans.
Yes.
And they are also, the teachers know them so well, so I just
Correct.
want to make sure, I know you're probably doing this, but keeping in mind that, it's a lot on our staff to keep the numbers in mind and
Yeah.
the little people that they are in a day-to-day basis, so I know that you're professional and you're doing that, but I just want to make a comment to that. I did notice though, and Anne, maybe you can help me, just for my own understanding.
sure,
The EL progress to proficiency numbers seem really high at the elementary level and then much lower at Blackhawk. Is that just from an age perspective?
No.
Okay,
Mrs. Leva, that's part of why we changed the class structure at Blackhawk this year, because we need those students to have opportunities to try English, to be able to be immersed throughout the day in content classes that are intentionally giving language support so that they feel safe, all of our students feel safe and comfortable to try out language.
Yeah.
Yeah, to take risks with language, that's the only way you'll grow. So we really shifted those structures.
yeah. But I do want to say, I mean, at the Tioga and Johnson level, those numbers look really good.
Yeah.
For, clearly the proficiency progress in those ELL classrooms are great, so kudos to the staff and to you for that. The other question I had is dual language, is that cohort part of EL?
Yes.
They are.
It does fall, so they do access testing as opposed to IER?
No, they do
No.
both.
Both,
You do
okay.
both, correct.
Do all EL students do both, or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's a state requirement.
And so that's the same for the, is it DI?
DLM, that's
DLM, dynamic
specific
learning
They
to
don't-
our special ed
Okay,
students.
just
Correct.
for my knowledge.
Sure.
And with the chronic absenteeism so the ROE is seeing this throughout?
Yes. And I think there's been a big shift after COVID. There's been many parents that see, remote instruction or, we could miss days and it will be okay. So we're really trying, and there's multiple ways that we're addressing that. And one is that engagement and fun in the classroom too, and celebrating learning and getting kids excited to be here, providing instruction where they can share their voices and they're highly engaged, is another part. And then for those kids that aren't here, reaching out to those families, letting them know, hey, we miss you. What can we do? How can we help you? To make sure they're coming in.
And the committee's currently putting some research together for families, so families who have students who are missing multiple days, so that they can see what that impact is on instruction when they miss 1 day, 5 days, 10 days. What does that look like instructionally? So parents have, a picture of what that means, because I don't know that parents always see the impact of those days, and so, we want to bring that education to our families as well.
And I'm sure, I would be curious to see at the high school too, because a lot of times it's the one oldest sibling has to take care of all of the younger siblings, or any of the younger siblings. So one middle schooler might have to stay home, no matter how many of the younger kids are. If any of them are sick, they're the one that stays home from school. So it can skew the numbers a little bit, I think, too, because they have more responsibility then.
And I think that's the importance of us digging into this data and having these conversations with families, so we can get a pulse on really what is that root cause of the absences, and are there things that we can be doing as a district to support families more? We don't know the answers to that yet, and so that's really the purpose of this committee, is really to start, working with our families and get a better understanding, So we can see that chronic absenteeism number go down, and we can see more progress for our students.
I have a question, like, is there ever any kind of like competency score, like, or times where we hold students back or suggest they retake a level of
Not
school?
typically. The research shows that retention really is not helpful. It's typically has more of a negative impact than it does a positive impact. So it's very, very rare. It's not that it never happens, but it's pretty rare because the impact of retention is pretty significant.
And that's where, again, gets us back to using the data, providing our students with the instruction they need to grow where they're at.
Yeah. And then, what, do you know, is our mobility rate high, or is that?
It's not super high. I don't believe it's above the state. Let me see if I can pull it up.
Mobility within,
Our families, like moving
Kids
out of
coming
the
out.
district,
I just
coming
wonder
in
if
and
it's
Kids from
out.
out,
higher
coming
at
in.
Blackhawk or not?
A 5%?
Oh, that's not bad.
It's not,
Yeah,
it's
there
not a
is.
lot.
No, as a district.
Yes, it's pretty low.
so I would say with that, just if that is low, then I think to your point with the chronic absenteeism, really reaching out and seeing what resources our families might need to support them and their children in order to get their children to schools, because it doesn't seem like we have a high mobility rate
No.
where, people are in and out,
Right.
and so it's the same. I feel like, so there's really an opportunity there to see if there's services we can offer.
Agreed.
Right, absolutely.
That's all I had.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's
Um,
mostly good.
Yeah, I think we, again,
I don't want to end on that note. I
And we're
think it's-
excited about the steps that we're
I think
taking.
it's
maybe we do
great.
gotta look
For
at
sure.
Blackhawk,
Yeah, you
though.
do.
Appreciate it.
You know, I didn't say it, but Blackhawk, we gotta look at Blackhawk, it's gotta, we'll figure that out. Okay, board committee reports. Anything? Okay, knocks that out. Administrative reports, announcements.
No announcements.
Okay, FOIA, Paul.
We had 3 FOIAs last month.
Any questions on those guys? Hearing none, let's go to the 5-year plan. Mr. Novak.
Yeah, you've got the slides here, Tim's putting them up on the screen. The first page kind of recaps where we are today. The district passed a referendum in 2003, so that was 20 years ago. Since that time, if you ignore construction, the district has run a surplus every single year since 2003. And what that lets us do then is pay for construction without having to go to the taxpayers for a tax increase. So District 2 is somewhat unusual in that we don't have to go ask for a tax increase when we want to do construction. And that's been very fortunate for us, and we've achieved that, I think, with having some discipline in the other years of not spending everything. So you can see at the bottom what our cash looked like at June 30th. We had about 40 million in cash, but a lot of it is allocated to certain things. Quite a bit of it was advance money that we'd already received for spending this year on normal operations. We set aside money for Blackhawk. We set aside money for debt service. So that number just kind of tells you if you wanted to go out and buy something else, that's what's available. Tim, on the next slide, here's the assumptions we're making. Most of these are not controversial. We have a number of grant-funded programs under both COVID grants and other grants. And in this forecast, we're assuming that those programs will wind down and whatever staff and expenses and purchases related to that will not be continued. That's a very oversimplifying way to look at it, but it's a good way for me to start the forecast. And then as we go into the budget preparation for next year, we can talk about internally how many of those positions we'd recommend to you might be able to be kept. But at this point in time, we're not assuming any of those. On the next slide, this is the year-by-year results. So this is not telling you how much cash we have altogether. It's just looking at each individual year and saying, how did we do that year? Because of things like debt service and other items that aren't the same from year to year, you know, comparing any one year to another is not always very helpful. The general pattern is kind of helpful. What you see here is that there is a lot of debt service in years 1, 2, 3, and 4, which would be 20, 24, 25. That's the second dot. The first dot is the year we're in now. The second dot is the year 24, 25, and then going on. In those 4 years, there's a lot of extra debt service, which does not continue into the future. So that's a piece of our forecast that you would want to bear in mind and know that it isn't going to continue in future years, that extra debt service. And you can see, as a result of that, we end up slightly positive in the last year because by then the debt service is gone. And then going back to how much cash is available, this sort of tells you where we are. The first number is the same number that was on the very first slide. And then the remaining numbers are forecast for the end of this year and the end of all future years. You can see it doesn't move around very much, and that's reflective of our planning position. We're trying to always make sure we have cash to meet our debt service. And so we have enough cash set aside to do all those things and maintain a pretty steady cash balance that's available if operations change or a proposal comes up for a project or an expansion or a staffing idea that you want to follow up on. Last but not least, I thought I would address the fact that we do see a decrease in the forecast as we go out into future years. Believe it or not, there's almost $1 million of that comes from interest income. After we spend on the Blackhawk renovation, we won't have nearly as much money in the bank, and I don't think we're expecting to make 5% on it either, which is the rate nowadays. And then you can see the second bullet, we have this debt service that's going to increase. About 500,000 of that increase continues on indefinitely. Then for 4 years, there's an extra 750,000 on top of that, which we've planned for, so we're okay for that. It's a lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions or dig deeper into any piece of it for anybody that has questions.
I have a question. You got so close to getting away. I know you mentioned that some of the resources, teachers, activities that we're doing that we're getting paid for from those grants that are wearing out may need to be eliminated. Are we trying to find other funding for those things, or are we just saying goodbye?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we have to assess throughout, but we applied for the multi-district grant, which would help to support a lot of that work if we were to obtain that. And then we're always looking for additional grants that would support the work that we're looking to do. So we're kind of in that evaluation process right now of what is being paid out of grants such as ESSER, what other funding do we have available to support those things, and then what are the things that we had just because it was COVID times that maybe we don't really need anymore.
Yeah, does that help? So we are hoping to keep as much as we can, but that depends on how we think we're doing and what other sources we can find. We're very excited about that multi-district grant application, so we're keeping our fingers crossed for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Novak? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to the consent agenda items. Anybody have any questions or want anything pulled from the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I get a motion to approve the consent agenda item?
Motion.
Second.
Get a second? Can I get a roll call?
Mr. Stoltman?
Aye.
Mrs. Leyva?
Aye.
Mrs. Dye?
Aye.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Laudadio?
Aye.
Ms. Parthamos?
Aye.
Okay, before we go to conference action items, we're gonna be pulling item D from that. from the action items. So we'll move right ahead with A, approve transfer from education fund to transportation fund.
Yeah,
Mr. Novak.
as we discussed briefly in the public hearing, the transportation fund spent a lot of money on buses this year. You can see I broke that out separate so you could see it. The total spending in that fund for the year is about 2 million, and 25% of that was for vehicle purchases, so that's an unusual number. And for that reason, we're recommending a transfer to keep the fund with a positive balance.
Any questions on that, guys? Hearing none, do I get a motion that the board approves a resolution authorizing a permanent transfer of $500,000 from the education fund to the transportation fund?
Motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Dye?
Aye.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Stoltman?
Aye.
Ms. Parthamos?
Aye.
Ms. Leyva?
Aye.
Mr. Laudatio?
Aye. Moving on to B, approved resolution to authorize litigation against social media companies.
Sure, so school districts right now are on the front lines of a national mental health crisis in youth that they're finding is being fueled by social media platforms and products. Preteens and teens are facing unprecedented levels of mental health and discipline issues involving student use of social media. So our district's council, which is Himes, Petrarca, and Fester, together with 3 other law firms, are representing school districts that are suing social media companies for damages caused by the company's actions. Many districts in our area are supporting this and are participating in this litigation with the goal of achieving relief to change how social media companies are operating and to safeguard the children of our schools. There's no cost to the district to participate. This legal representation would be on a contingency basis. Legal fees and reimbursable costs would only be payable if there was a settlement or a legal judgment against the social media companies. Administration is bringing this forward to the board so that you can decide if you would like to participate or not.
Any questions on this?
And you said there's no cost to us for doing this, right? So Justin's not sending us a bill? Okay.
Any questions?
Well, can I make a comment?
Sure.
So I work in high school, and we have similar truancy and absence rates and discipline issues, and see things like we do at Blackhawk. And we experimented this past year with cell phones and social media, and I think this is a great idea, because even one kid having social media is enough for every kid to want to have social media. And the damage that I see firsthand every day that it does for the students and their behavior, the way they act, the way they communicate is devastating. So I think it's great, and I think they need to be held responsible, because there's such a peer pressure to function and communicate through these mediums, and it's so damaging, so damaging. It's so sad.
I agree with Lori. My daughters were stressed out doing Snapchat streaks in middle school. They were like, I gotta do my streaks. And
The addiction is
Yeah.
it's very, very real. It is very, very real. It's horrible. I feel really bad for all young people because they cannot put their phone down. It's terrible.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, can I have a motion to authorize the district's council, Himes, Petrarca, and Fester, and 3 other law firms to represent the district in lawsuits against 1 or more social media companies for damages caused by the company's actions?
motion.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Stoltman?
Aye.
Ms. Parthamos?
Aye.
Mrs. Dye?
Aye.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Laudatio?
Aye.
Mrs. Leyva?
Aye.
Okay, C, approved property tax relief grant. Mr. Novak?
Yes, this is a grant that is offered by the State Board of Education. The mechanics of it are that it's a competitive process. Only some districts succeed in getting the grant. The ones that succeed reduce their property tax for 2 years in exchange for receiving the grant. during those 2 years, they still lose some net revenue because the amount of the grant is not quite big enough to make up for the property tax reduction. But in the third year, the district can choose to reinstate the tax while it still collects the grant going forward. And so you can be even or even ahead by the time you get to year 3 or year 4. We have always applied. I'm sorry to say we've not come close yet. There are about 850 school districts in the state. Our property tax rate is about the 150th to 180th highest. The award winners tend to be somewhere in the top 50. It's strictly a mechanical calculation based on tax rate, so we've not been close enough yet to win. I always recommend to you that you apply just because it's a good financial practice to.
With a shot.
That's right. Can't win if you don't
You
enter.
give some money back.
Right. The question for you, besides should we apply or not, is how much should we apply for? In past years, we've only applied for a modest portion of what we're eligible for. I've learned that we are the only school district among all the applicants that did that. Everybody else applied for the maximum
Yeah.
amount, so I'm inclined to suggest that you do that. I do not think we're gonna win. There are too many districts ahead of us this year. But I think it's something that we should give a try to.
Should still try.
What do you guys think?
I like it.
It's like,
I say maximum amount.
We do this every year, don't we?
We
do.
Yeah.
But we never went for the max usually, but I think we should. I mean,
Shoot for the stars.
that's it. Any other questions on that? Okay, do I get a motion, we'll, go for the maximum amount and authorize administration to apply for the property relief tax grant? Your motion?
Yes.
Second. Roll call.
Mrs. Dye?
Aye.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Laudadio?
Aye.
Mrs. Leyva?
aye.
Mrs. Parthamos?
Aye.
Mr. Stoltman?
Aye.
Okay, new business. Do we have any new business?
I have something.
Okay.
I'd like to talk about like reviewing our purchasing processes and see if we can include some bidding and proposal status into our purchasing process. So if, maybe bring it for review or something along those lines, because I feel like sometimes we might leave some money out there that we could be saving.
Okay, that's, Jim brought up this point. It's a real good point. We do need to look at it. It's been probably 10 years since we looked at it, or longer. And I agree with them on some of these things, so we should, if we could bring it back to you guys, put it back in your court, come up with something and bring it to us.
Sure.
You guys all okay with that?
Sure. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we do have a closed session.
Yes.
Okay, we're done with our meeting, but we do got a closed session.
New business still, right?
What?
Something for new business?
Oh, I thought you had more new business?
Well, yeah, small.
Go ahead, sorry.
But, there was just, I was looking for something on the Blackhawk website, and there were a few, several links that weren't working. And I didn't know who to address. So, I just think, some of them were kind of important links. So I didn't know, they were just like, it's a file not found, or whatever. So. I just wanted
Can you
to
give
bring
me
it
an
up.
example, Lori? Like what were you trying to get on that wasn't working?
Like on the main page, it was specifically, I didn't look at the other sites, but it would be like, if you could bring it up, I can show you, because like my computer.
Cindy's
died,
doing it
so,
right now.
The Blackhawk
Blackhawk?
website? Can you bring that up?
We're in the middle of revamping some of our navigation as we redesign for a new platform to be launched after the break. Throughout some of that, there have been some pages that have moved and caused some of these links to go with
That would be why then.
404 errors and things like that. Anytime you encounter them, usually if someone points them out, I can fix them within 5 minutes. It's just a matter of knowing, oh yeah, there was that link that moved, we moved one page to a different section, and so that threw off the whole connection. So we can fix them really easily once we identify them. It's just a matter of going through and identifying them. And we're in that process right now where a lot of that navigation is changing on the district site, and then we have to mirror it on the school sites. And so and then they're also migrating content to the new platform. So there may be some of these challenges that we encounter for the next month and a half or something like that, until after we launch in
Just be
January.
patient, maybe.
Yeah, send me the links and we'll fix them as soon as we go.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say if you find one, don't be afraid to let us know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because they're
just email
checking
me.
them as they go, but if they miss one, you're gonna get that error.
And
Okay.
also on top of what
Just let
Lori
me know
said,
when.
I got some calls from some Johnson parents that like the bios for the new assistant principal and stuff aren't on the website. And they asked me about that a couple different times.
Well, it's
So
good to know that like there's like a,
They asked me a couple of weeks ago, it was a follow-up, so I don't know if it's still that way. I'd have to look.
Can we though, because obviously Lori has access to Tim and Katie, but my concern is a parent who doesn't do that. So are we following up on,
We can
just
put
to
a
say,
message.
just let us know, we might not be hearing from some of those
That's
parents?
probably a good idea now that we're kind of fully immersed in the
Yeah.
whole content migration and revamping the navigation. To put that message out in our next BSD2 news, it comes out first Monday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
We'll get that out.
thank you.
Any other new business? Okay, hearing none, we're gonna have a short closed session. So do I get a motion to go into closed session for matters of personnel?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Do we have a roll call?
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mrs. Leva?
Aye.
Mrs. Dye? Mr. Laudadio?
Aye.
Ms. Parthamos?
I.
Mr. Stoltman?
Aye.
Okay, guys, We're back in our meeting. Do I get a motion to end District 2 Board meeting at 7:50 PM?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're out. Thank you, everybody.
It's so